Well, shalom and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. We are doing another book review. Yeah, it's true. We're doing another one right now. And this time around, we're going to be looking at an extremely powerful and potent book that will just change the way that you think about the Exodus. And it is written by Yosef Deutsch, who has written a whole series, which is really, you could call the series Let My Nation series. Let My Nation Go? No, because not all of them are Let Them Go. I don't know. Just Let My Nation something series, I guess you could. Oh, this isn't got off to a very good start. Anyway, here's the book. It's called Let My Nation Go. And I believe this is the first one in the series. It could be the second, so just put down in the comments if I've got that wrong, but I think it's the first one, Let My Nation Go. Yosef Deutsch. I don't know much about the author, but I know he's a rabbi, and he has received rabbinical approval. So this is a kosher book. It is put out by Feldheim Publishers, which are, along with ArtScroll, are a very trustworthy publishing company for kosher Torah books. And this is a page turner, as they say. You won't be able to put this down. It's the Exodus, the story of the Exodus, like you've never read it before. You'll realize how the scriptures are written in almost like a cipher, and are written economically, and are written in a way for you to discover more that's actually inhabiting in the text of the Hebrew. And when you have somebody that's actually able to siphon a lot of that information, which you'll find in most of the more popular Jewish commentaries, but even beyond that, by looking to the Gematria and seeing all other things that reveal themselves, and then actually having that all unraveled for you, worked out for you, and then put into a running narrative, gives a view of the story that is completely out of this world compared to the one you're familiar with in the Bible of the Exodus and the plagues leading up to the Exodus. And essentially this is what this book covers, is that period of time. So in actuality, it takes from a compilation of Talmudic and Midrashic sources, and it just doesn't let up, and it doesn't apologize for some of the things you read. Some of the things are just shocking. The way the Egyptians treated the Israelites is just absolutely shocking. It is abominable what the Paro did, bathing in the blood of Hebrew babies. The stuff that we know about because of we read in the Bible, we read in the Torah portions during this time in Parshas Bo and all these things, which is this is the actual Torah portion for this week, actually. And so it's absolutely okay. I'm just gonna, if I sit here and just keep saying it's absolutely amazing, like, okay, what's that achieve? Let's actually read some of it. But you'll find sort of stories and little things behind the scenes. It's like if I was to describe to you a movie that you really liked. Let's say Lord of the Rings. That seems to be a movie that very few people disagree are the best trilogy ever made in the Western world. And so you say, okay, you're a fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So do you like the special edition? Love the special edition. Do you like watching deleted scenes? Love watching deleted scenes. Do you like watching behind the scenes and documentaries? I love it. Well, this is all that rolled into one. So if you're familiar with the Exodus as we read in the Bible and the plagues leading up to the Exodus, and then you read this, you're like, wow, to the point that when you go back to the biblical text, it'll put a lot of things into perspective of what actually went on there, that up until that point you may not have noticed, but then you realize, so that's why Paro says that I'll never see your face again, and yet he does see his face again, and you kind of get a lot of answers to some little oddities that actually occur. So like I said, I can sit here and tell you this is an amazing book. It's on the level of Akiva, which is the book that I did the review for just before this video. To the point I actually made a whole series of Weird Hebrew Tales that were based off this book. you can go into the playlist on this channel and go to Weird Hebrew Tales Plagues. I think it's called Plagues. And there are 10 videos, and the source for the material in the videos is largely from this book. And you watch the videos and you go, I didn't know that happened during the plague of locusts. I mean, things like the Cushites, who were a nation of people that sort of bordered Egypt. There was a dispute of where the borders of Egypt were and where it ended and the Cushite nation's land started, right? And it wasn't until the plague of locusts where somebody happened to be positioned along an area of where the supposed border between Mitzrayim and the Cush was, and they could see that all of the locusts were almost like a line, were just inhabiting this airspace of Egypt, and you could see the actual entire border of Egypt along Cush in a perfect line, because all the masses of locusts that were in the air, they were not going over the actual line, the border of where that border was that bordered Cush, all the way up to as far as the locusts were actually flying in the sky. So you could see this huge, like, it was like almost like a structure. And so you read stuff like that and you just go, oh, wow, that is absolutely crazy. The dogs not barking. There weren't just dogs. There were Anubis, these actual creatures with dog heads that would guard the borders of Egypt, or on the fringes of Egypt. So if anybody tried to escape, they would bark and they would chase after them. The plague of animals, just how brutal the plague of animals was. And Moshe, excuse me if I can speak, I'm so excited. Moshe assembled all the animals before they launched themselves into Mitzrayim, and he basically gave them a combat brief. And so they all assembled before him, much like Noah, with all the animals being obedient to him. And then Moshe commanded them then to go in and wipe them out. And so you have animals from cold climates like polar bears, and their climate habitat would actually miraculously follow them around. And so you would have cheetahs and snakes, wild boars, and whatever their requirement of their habitat was, that habitat would miraculously form around them if it was far out of the season or the habitat of where they normally would actually live. And so they were literally pulled from all the four corners of the world. So there would have been animals on their way journeying to Mitzrayim before the plagues even commenced. And you just don't think about that. You just go, oh. And I haven't even scratched the surface of what is in this book. Like there's people, they love that. They go, I love the Bible, I love God and everything like this. And they're missing out on so much information. You're saying, oh, I love the Bible. And you're like, really? I don't see that you're a person that loves the Bible. I see that you're probably a person that acknowledges the Bible because it's the right thing to do and you believe that it's true and everything, but you're not really that fazed by it. You're kind of more into doing other stuff and on the way acknowledging that this is all true because you believe it's true, and I believe you believe it's true, but you're really just not that interested. This book, if you're not interested by the time you finish this book, check your pulse, as they say, because you may not even be alive. There are other books in this series as well. I wrote them down here. There's Let My Nation Serve Me, Let My Nation Live, Let Me Join Your Nation. That is the one about Ruth. There's one about Jonah, there's one about Noah, which is Let My World Survive. That's the one about Noah. That's probably the next one I want to get, because that's going to have some crazy stuff. It's going to have Og, the giant that attached himself to Noah's Ark and everything. It'll have all that in it. Let My Nation Be Warned, Let My Nation Descend, Let My Nation Wander. That's not all of them, I don't think. I think there's more than that. And I've only read this one, Let My Nation Go. But this is just absolutely amazing. Let's see if I can find a bit. The Death of the Dead. The Death of the Dead. Firstborn people. So this is the plague of the death of the firstborn, the last plague. Firstborn people or animals were held in the highest regard by the Egyptians. Okay, so this is straight away we find out one of the reasons why the firstborns were going to die is because the Egyptians, like the Hebrews actually, they had an emphasis, they placed emphasis on all firstborn, not only human beings, but animals as well. Because they worshipped the lamb whose sign was the first of the zodiac, because remember the Mitzrayim, they worshipped the lamb as a god. Whenever a firstborn child died, the Egyptian family would create a sculpted likeness and bury it under the house, or else carve an image of the child into the walls of the house. They would then sing and dance before the image or the sculpture as if the child was still alive. On this fateful night, at the stroke of midnight, the Egyptians heard a powerful thunderclap and saw a jagged bolt of lightning strike the land. Suddenly, all the likenesses and images of the dead of the firstborn, of the dead firstborn, were destroyed in an instant. So anybody who'd made any type of effigy or monument or sculpture or picture on a wall that represented the death of a firstborn, that they would annually or biannually get in front of and dance and sing in front of, those images were destroyed. Those images were destroyed. So even people, families that didn't have a firstborn, they were still affected. The metal melted, the wood rotted, the stone shattered, and nothing remained of the memorials of the dead firstborn children. One woman began to scream, and this is a story that I've actually relate in one of my videos. So go online and check out my Weird Hebrew Tales videos of the plagues, because I actually relate this story on one of the videos. So go and check it out. One woman began to scream with even more heartrending cries than all the rest. The woman was alone in the world and with no children or any other family. So she was just all by herself. The only connection she had to another person was the statue memorializing her dead firstborn child. She used to pay homage at this statue and thereby console her broken heart. And now the shrine of her son had been completely destroyed. Even the dogs, they actually dragged the bodies of the firstborn dead out of their graves and chewed on their bones and their remains. And so people got to see people that have previously been dead and buried, their remains were dug out of the graves and dragged out by dogs and animals in front of them. This woman was a high-born lady. She was a noble woman in Egypt, often attended the royal court of Paro. When Moshe had warned of the impending plague, she actually spoke up and she said, "You say that there'll be a great outcry among all the people of Egypt. Well, what about me? I'm an old woman. I have no mother or father, no brother nor sister, no son or daughter. Why would someone like me cry out?" And she obviously wasn't the firstborn herself, because it says there'll be somebody dead in every household. So she's like saying, well, how can somebody be dead in my household? It's not going to affect me. "Just wait and see," Moshe replied. "You will be the first of all the people to cry over this plague." So the first ones to be killed were all the idols and all the images and effigies that commemorated all the dead firstborn. They all got destroyed. And then it was the dead firstborn that were dragged out and their bodies were desecrated. And then actual living firstborns were then killed. And they didn't all die straight away. Some of them died at different phases and different ways. This is just, oh my God, this is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. You will love this book. "I have no mother or father, no brother, no sister." Yeah, I read that. "Just wait and see," Moshe said. "You will be the first of all the people to cry over this plague." And now this prophecy had come true. Not only the enshrined and venerated firstborn were exhumed. Not only the enshrined and venerated firstborn were exhumed. There you go. Every firstborn, Egyptians long buried in graveyards and under homes, were not spared. The dogs ran wild over Egypt, digging up old corpses in caves, graves, burial chambers, and ripping them to pieces. Families watched in horror as the dogs scattered the bones of their dead relatives in the streets of Egypt. In this way, grief and mourning visited the homes of all the Egyptians. And if you think about it logically, this is how every household became affected, because not everybody would have a firstborn in their home. Even those in which there was no firstborn to die. If a family did not have a child that died, it had an ancestor whose body was exhumed and defiled by the rampaging dogs. And miraculously, it was all done in view of them. The dogs literally came and dragged it in front of them, And obviously there was some sort of clothing or emblem that they knew this was their dead ancestor. All of the Egyptians were grief-stricken. One woman, I'm frothing at the mouth here. Calm down, Jason, it's not that. Yes, it is that good. One woman thought she could save her child by hiding him on the roof, but right after midnight, the dog climbed onto the roof and snatched the child. When the woman went back went to check on her child, she found only emptiness. In a panic, she looked down into the street and saw the dog dragging away a half-eaten child. She screamed with such anguish that all Egypt virtually trembled at the sound. So the screaming of the grief was so bad that it was affecting people's hearing. So babies had to be taken into places that were sheltered so they wouldn't hear the screams. Because the screams, if you hear like deafening screams, like maybe for a few minutes you could probably endure it, but if it was for a few hours, you'd probably end up getting your hearing affected. And this is just one plague. This is a plague that came at the end of all the other plagues, which are all brutal, and they're all described in like gory detail in this book. Some Egyptians, fearful of Hashem's wrath, tried to save their firstborn children by sending them to sleep in the homes of the Jewish people. These same Egyptians had brought their animals indoors from the fields before the plague of hail, but their attempts were to no avail. Just as Hashem passed over the Jewish homes to strike the Egyptian homes, he also passed over the Jewish homes in their homes to kill the Egyptians who were there. An Egyptian firstborn died even as he slept in the same bed as a Jew. And the Jew slept so deeply that they did not hear the outcry of the Egyptians. So a miraculous sleep was given to the Hebrew babies so they wouldn't be affected by the screams. It's like they couldn't hear them. This is insane stuff. This is absolutely amazing stuff to read. You just go, wow. Because you realize, because you read through the biblical accounts year after year, and if you're lazy, you're not reading the commentaries, and you're just reading the same story, and it just can be tiresome. And you can't do that. You can't just keep reading the Torah portion and just keeping your reading to that, whether it's in Hebrew or whether it's in English or whatever your native language you speak. You need to investigate the text and learn about, what was the breadth and the height and the width and the volume and the details of these events. Because when you get into the detail, you find out more. You find out more about the nature of Hashem. Other Egyptians, in anticipation of the plague, tried to conceal their firstborn children in the supposed safety of the temples of the Egyptian gods, but it was worse. But it was the worst of all the places. During the plague, Hashem destroyed the Egyptian temples' gods as well. Metal idols melted to the ground, and wooden idols rotted, stone idols crumbled, and everything associated with the idols disintegrated. The Egyptians were so devoted to their gods that their destruction caused greater grief and sorrow than the death of the firstborn children. So this is how off the head they were, that they were freaking out even more over the death of their gods, than their supposed gods, than their own children. The only idol not destroyed was Baal Zephon. Remember, Baal Zephon was an outlaying idol that was actually out of Egypt and on the border. Hashem allowed this idol to remain standing so that Pharaoh and the Egyptians would delude themselves into thinking that at least one of their gods had some real power. This would encourage them to chase the fleeing Egyptians from Egypt and then be drowned in the sea. This would encourage them to chase the fleeing Jews from Egypt and then be drowned in the sea. But we know that the opposite happened. And so cleverly, during the midst of all these gods dying, all these representations of the gods dying, Hashem allowed Baal Zephon, one god, to remain intact. And the major effigy of that god was not in central part of Egypt. It was almost, I think it was on the border of Egypt. And so this was kept as a ruse to lull the very superstitious Egyptians into thinking, hang on, they're actually camped near Baal Zephon. That's the one god who, all the structures dedicated to that god didn't get damaged. Okay, that's a sign that this is through this God's power we will conquer the Hebrews. Get the book. I'm not talking about it anymore. It's just so good. I've barely scratched the surface. In Australia, I picked it up years ago. It was published in 1998 initially. It was $46.50 when I bought it, Australian dollars. Probably about 50 now in Australian dollars. I think in US it'll probably be about $35 or $30 maybe. Or 25 maybe. You can probably pick it up secondhand. Anyway, get this book. Do not muck around.